So, we've been playing the Guilty Gear Strive Season 4 patch since Halloween now, and I'm mostly familiar with the cast at this point, so I want to share my impressions on how this major balance patch has actually affected the game. I don't want to say this is like an actual tier list. I used to do videos called This Is Not a Tier List, and this is kind of like along the same lane. But I also wanted to do this because I just kind of want this video to exist just in case they balance the game again. Even if it's a light balance, I think it's going to be meaningful. So I want to go from the bottom to the top here. And in the bottom, and this is why I'm not being like, this is my tier list on the game right now, are characters I'm kind of unsure about. And this is a pretty widespread of characters here. So I want to start with the character I think I have the least straight up amount of experience in this patch, and it's Asuka. Now, I'm not a big fan of Asuka. You might even say I strongly dislike Asuka, but I can't really make a call on him. I know he's nerfed. I know the change to Fire Cube really affects him, but I don't know too well how it's played out in matches. I have played probably less than 20 games against him with Baiken and like less than 50 with Mei, so I won't comment on his strength at the moment. But on the other hand, I've actually played against Zato a lot this patch, but I kind of can't make up my mind how good I think he is. Now, the command grab buff, originally I was just like, oh, this is just them treating it like season 1, but he can combo into it because of Blue Wild Assault, so I actually think that's pretty good in some spots. I also think his eddy meter is less weak to system mechanics, especially burst, because of a previous change from 3.2. The biggest thing is I don't know how impactful these changes are, and I feel like some characters got crazy changes too. So even though I think they continually make him better, I just think they don't give him enough. One of Zato's strengths was positive bonus, and back in 3.1 they kind of like nerfed positive bonus from his perspective because he liked the long duration positive bonus. But now, kind of with the way wall break works, he's continually giving his opponent resources, and even though they can't use burst against Eddie, I still think this is not that great. On top of that, Sun Void was also nerfed too as far as offense, so I don't really know how I feel about him, even though I play against him a lot. Then there's Axel. I've heard quite a few complaints about this character, especially mainly they say he doesn't work right now, but when I watch him, he looks fine. I get the rainwater nerf being annoying, but also the pushback looks like he pushes characters into his ideal range now. This is another character that I don't have a ton of match time against, so I'm also not really going to comment on how good I think he is. Then there's Dizzy. So while I break down every character to see like what they can kind of do, like routinely good things, can they or can they not do these things? That video, by the time this comes out, has probably been out for like a week or so. I think she's kind of committal. I think there are characters that are really good at countering her at a lot of ranges, and the biggest complaint I hear about her right now is how she gives resource to people. I sort of think that's a routing problem, but I need to take more time to watch people play Dizzy and also play against Dizzy myself to make up my mind on this. So I'm not sure if she feels okay, because she mostly feels okay to me and just sees like a little love, or does she need like some things reworked? And lastly, Bridget. So Bridget was kind of weird in that like they didn't really give her that much, so it feels like that the devs feel like the role change is a huge deal, and it seems like offensively is quite good for her. But then, even though the developers said that one of the goals for this patch was to lower damage and have more interactions, not only do I feel like the damage is the same or sometimes slightly higher than before, but Bridget actually, to my knowledge, has not gotten an HP increase. And I had to double check this, but off the top of my head, she also didn't get moves that deal more damage like a lot of characters. So even though it seems like she's good, it still takes her a while to finish people off, and she dies fast. There's always characters that die fast and end up being pretty good, but I think specifically right now with the HP thresholds for all characters being up and then also damage being up, this actually is a pretty big deal. So I don't know how much this affects her and my perception of her being kind of good right now. So while those previous characters, some of them I know have problems, but I just don't know how much it affects them. Some of them he will say the characters have problems, and I'm like, I don't know if it's that big of a deal though. I think Millia pretty certainly has big problems right now. I will say the fact that they nerfed a character that has been considered pretty weak for the entirety of the game, even with multiple people working pretty hard, myself included, on this character, and the way they did it is pretty crazy in my opinion. The backdash buff that she got to her air backdash is actually pretty good though, and it opens up more mix-up potential that she didn't have before. And to be honest, even with system mechanics in mind, I never think Millia's problem is doing mix-ups ever. It's more that she just feels unsafe all the time, and it doesn't feel like good ever when you're like doing things to people. And on top of that, because the HP changes, she also has less HP than Chipp now for the, I think, the first time in Guilty Gear ever. Then we have Abba. So as usual, I put Abba in her own group because she is a pretty unique character to me, because she does multiple things. Like, she is the best, or one of the best counterpick characters in the game. Her match spread is pretty polarizing, so if you solo main her, you probably feel like she's struggling, but if you use her for counterpicks, then you probably feel like she's pretty good. Now, she got 2 pretty impactful nerfs for her entire matchup spread, but again, if you use her from a counterpick perspective, it's not a big deal. So, and they're both in normal mode, which for at least my purposes playing her, I was really worried they were going to do stuff to Jealousy Rage mode, but they nerfed her normal 236k and her dash. The dash was inevitable, and also they have nerfed other characters' dashes. Well, really one, I guess, like Leo off the top of my head. But the 236k one is kind of a big deal because that was really rewarding on counter hit, and a lot of characters had problems dealing with it on block at different ranges. So it's a little bit harder now. You have to be a little bit more forceful with resource. But for the matches that I like to play her in my head, she's pretty much the same character. In this patch, I put the most time I have against Bedman since 2.5, because starting around like season 2.5 in the middle and end of it, I was like, hey guys, I can actually talk about Bedman. I took the time to learn some Bedman stuff. Then they changed Bedman a lot, and I was like, sorry guys, I have no idea what's going on again. So I am a pinch unsure about him, but I'm a little more certain just because I have a ton more time against him recently, and I actually think he has some potential and could be strong in this version. If they didn't nerf his previous style of offense, I think he'd be like clearly strong right now. But right now when I lose rounds to him, it's not because I feel like I'm in extended offense for a long time. It's usually that he didn't die, I give him meter, and he does something that gives him install, and then he closes the round with install. The extra HP makes it feel like using this to close rounds is more reliable. So then we have Testament. So in the patch notes, Testament's throw change, a lot of people that I talked to thought that was a really strong sounding change, myself included, and they didn't get a lot of extra stuff this patch. I do think it's a big change, but with the additional changes they gave to other characters in season 4, this change I think feels kind of muted. But I think Testament is back to being like the definitive mid-tier of this game, like around 2.5. I said that about the character a lot. Flexible, fast, has to be called out, builds resource pretty quickly, has more screen control now, which is pretty nice, and has more advantage, and uniquely is good at pushing offense in the corner. I want to say, but they do it in like their way instead of a bunch of characters doing it similarly to Testament, if that makes sense. Now Faust. So I oddly feel that Faust is nerfed this patch, even though they gave him like new tools. So I think it's really the more varied item interaction, from getting hole in one and also making it so he can actually hit the items reliably. I don't know about other people, but I was pretty surprised when I was recording things that he could hit more than hammer before this patch, before season 4.0. And I think the big thing about this is that a lot of his items both players can interact with, but with hole in one he can make it so that he specifically has an advantageous position, which seems to be good. So that's why they did stuff like nerf J2K. Another thing about him is, despite me, let's say, not being a big Faust fan, which might sound like an understatement to you, I do find it very odd that they're so careful with Faust and like Zato, but certain other characters in this game, they nerf something and then they give him something huge to compensate for it, or even get like a weakness removed. But that's a discussion for another time. So Ino, I have actually been playing a lot against Ino as well, and despite playing against her a lot, I don't have as much to say about her as Faust. I feel like after all these like movement and dash blocking and making her like more slippery type buffs they give her, it feels like they just try to band-aid Ino by making her do more damage and like upping her combo ability. I guess that's a good way to do it. Ino players seem to be happy. I think the biggest single change I think is clearly HCL, but I also think the stroke change is pretty good, because now you have to specifically use moves that hit down there rather than banking on a move that's really active that you end up trading with, which I think is pretty good for her. Now Elphelt. So Elphelt got a bunch of changes. Now the biggest ones I think are probably Grenade and how it's easier to combo than before, the Shotgun Ender leading to a hard knockdown, and also like bouncing off the wall. I actually thought when I read this change that like she would be ridiculous because of this, but they did do this the right way. I think they understand that she would be really crazy if she had that change. And then also there's the Bomb Vest. I mentioned Bedman closing rounds of install, and I think the Bomb Vest is either the best or like tied for the best with Gigantor of like that type of round closing utility super. So then Jacko. So Jacko is interesting to me because she just feels strong in general. The main nerf to her is to her sweep, and I know a lot of people are very mad about it. Then this might come off as like a little mean maybe, but like I feel like in this game a lot of player bases just get bad because things change, and I do get it though, because you are doing this thing, you like to doing this thing, now you have to learn a new thing, or in the extreme case, because I think Jacko has this case, like anytime they make a change to Jacko, it affects her a lot because it takes a while to develop the character just because of how she works. So even though I'm like, man, just figure out new stuff, because like that's what you always do in an Arxis game, I get why people are mad about it, you know? The first thing I thought was, how bad is it going to be? And my main thought was like, if she couldn't even set up offense off it, it would be pretty bad, but it seems she could do that. I don't know what else people are going to do over time. Jacko is usually a character that takes a while to kind of like flourish. So this is kind of a we'll see. I always think she can get kind of better. I never feel like she's like top tier, but she always ends up recently like highish tier to me, and I expect that from her in this version as well. Then Baiken. I have so much to say about this character, but I'll try to keep it brief. I think she's quite strong. I'm unsure how strong still I think she is. I've heard at extremes like top 5, which is what I heard about her before I switched to her. I don't think she's that good. A lot of the stuff that's better are things that she honestly probably should have had for a long time. So it feels good to like with punish with far slash and to combos more often, actually have more reward for defense after getting round after round after round of nerfs on her defense. Being faster, of course, is nice, especially with the way that this game's burst works and how people set things up in neutral. And it's fun that she has a new thing to aim for on defense that can lead to her winning. I think it's definitely unique in the game that she has the guard cancel. So it just ends up, how will people use it over time effectively? Can you weigh things the same way that people built things around parry in the past, especially when it did more damage? I can see her peaking at like top 10 unless they give her some extra stuff. And I know people were like, oh, you're greedy, why are you asking for more? A bunch of the stuff I was asking for originally were just things that other characters had, and I think she still has some problems, but like they're not a big deal. So in Potemkin, so now we're more than a month out after the death of the 6K Kara. I know a lot of people really enjoyed that, and I was even planning on making like a video about like this thing, because he's not the only one that lost like this thing you can optimize around. You know, Baiken had clean a gun, that got removed as well. But I want to say he's overall quite a bit stronger than before. Garda is much harder to defend against than before, especially if you haven't been managing your burst well against him. Potbuster of armor is crazy. The only other grappler I played against that has armor on their grab is Broly, and Broly is like, I mean, there are multiple videos made about how crazy he is in DBFZ. I don't think Potemkin is quite there yet, but it seems like they want him to be pretty strong right now. The enhanced range on it comes up quite a bit too, because now it's just like a flat 5 frames plus it's bigger. So I've seen a lot of like weird funky interactions with Potbuster in this version that I've never seen in prior versions. He also has almost as much HP as Asuka with mana, so he really endures. He always gets meter. He always gets meter to do stuff with Hammerfall and Gigantor. And you're definitely going to be able to burst multiple times, especially depending on how characters build their game plans. If a character's game plan is based around wall break, you probably be able to burst twice in a round. And not to mention, like Testament, Potemkin just got big buffs in 3.2, things like the Hammerfall hard knockdown and the 5H hard knockdown on airborne characters, but then they also gave Potemkin more big changes this patch. So I think he's doing really well right now. I want to say with relative certainty that this is his best version right now, but I'm open to hearing other opinions. So then we have Geo. So the big obvious loss to Geo is the guard crush on her spiral arrow. It was a very powerful tactic. for sure, and I know people are sad she lost that, but I actually think some of the stuff that she got is pretty good. So for starters, 214K being -5 with additional pushback is really nice. Most people who played characters who could punish 214K have never actually practiced IBing 214K because they already got an easy punish on it just from blocking it normally. Now she has space traps off it, which is very nice. Also, you can 6p it, but 6ping Geo is like you are betting the farm on that. She is so good at space traps that like you have to be super confident, and most characters don't even get that much of their 6p, where if she baits you properly, you just explode. The speed buff is also huge, and Geo players have been sitting on their meter for the damage and defense buff for a while, so now they also get a speed buff that lets them whip punish things that they have no business whip punishing from super far. I honestly think she will probably go up a little bit too, because there's certain small changes, like things like using 6H, for example, into knockdown, that hard knockdown now, and then she's close to them, that I think they can develop more as well. So then there's Kai, and Kai I have kind of mixed feelings about. On paper, his changes seemed pretty strong, but in practice, I feel like he's slightly weaker than before. I also understand why they did do this, especially if you're like mad about Kai, you've been playing Kai for a while. Because he has this like mode he's supposed to aim for, but you kind of don't have to do it, it kind of felt like. But his combo ability definitely suffered for it. I know he has good stuff with Shock State, but I feel like the way they went about it is like they want Shock State to be a win more, but then they nerfed him outside of Shock State, so that it's like, how can Shock State be a win more, if that makes sense. Despite that though, I think he still has his other strengths, like being fast, having really good pokes, building a lot of meter from neutral, so I think he's still pretty good. So then there's Slayer. Slayer honestly is probably better than this. I think I have this idea of him because he really didn't get changed, and his HP relative to the cast has gone down. So before I felt like, Slayer always has a meter even when I'm beating him up, where now I'm like, oh, like he died. Like I'm surprised he died here. The HP thing, again, kind of matters because he still does like a lot of damage. His offense is still really good. He's still good at space trapping you and stuff. It just feels like that I'm not giving him meter anymore, and it feels like when I hit him, he dies. So then Anji endures. At this point, unless they give Anji significant nerfs, I think he's always going to be high / potentially top tier for the rest of this game's lifespan. He has a ton of HP, great guts. The Rin thing I would say is a buff. You kind of have to change how you structure your fusion offense because of it, but with charge fusion into Rin not having a gap, and I believe the gap for fusion Rin is 4 frames right now, it's like conditioning a different way so you can cash out on Nagiha. Nagiha did have to be nerfed. There were some matchups where you just couldn't punish it in a meaningful way, so they wouldn't care. They would just do the low over and over, which is pretty annoying. I played one of them, so I would know. Then I think the parry being buffed is a pretty big deal. It is a super, but again, he has high HP and guts, so you're dealing with it every round. And they took away one of the main counterplays to the move, which is to make it go the wrong way. The move also has like no recovery, so you're pretty encouraged to either play a character with a projectile that covers you, and so that you're like, I believe it's a -1 guard crush, or you have to throw him. And again, you have to deal with this every single round, so depending on the round goes, it can be pretty annoying. On top of that, his combo ability is still good. He's still really threatening. You can't swing into him very easily, but he can swing into you. So I think he's always going to be a threat in this game as long as he's made like this. But then Chipp, so Tightrope Run seems to be incredibly strong. Luckily, I've only played matchups where my characters can fight him on the rope decently. It seems that he has Millia style anti-airs with it too, because you can bounce off it different ways, which on the one hand I like because I think anti-air is oddly strong and scrubby in this game. Like, it's too easy because of the air dash is slow. But on the other hand, Chips feels better than Capel, so I'm like, man, this is kind of a whack that he has this and then Capel's bad. But I think it adds a lot to his game. It gives him more full screen presence than just standing there and waiting or throwing himself at you too, so it adds a new dynamic to his game. So Soul, despite some nerfs and combo changes, I still think he's pretty good. Fafnir is the first time I want to say in a while that he has like a safe cancel option. Of course he has good frame data on things like his 5H, of course his Far Slash, and like sweep. but having a new tool to play with in pressure and making people change how they defend against him, especially when he doesn't have burst for wall assault, I think is pretty good. The HDP change seems to low-key be a buff. It does a ton of damage and splats instantly, so it makes his low option off mix-up seem to be better. I actually think his power level is similar to last patch, it's just that characters are better now. So next is Nago, and I think Nago's kind of a weird one. It read like he got some nerfs, but I think it plays out pretty decently. He can do a lot of chip damage at ranges where characters can't really do anything about it. I guess the main thing for him is that he feels a little bit more volatile, I think, because he can't enforce himself so directly, but he does chip damage, and then he's encouraged to combo into Blood Rage because he can extend off it. This is a character that I think is always pretty much going to be fundamentally good in this game, and the only reason I don't have him in the top is, again, I just think they keep kind of buffing him towards being more and more volatile. So then there's Mei, and Mei is damage. Her roots mid-screen have been standardized a little bit thanks to the leap change, and the leap change actually makes her neutral pretty tricky depending on the matchup because she can steer it. She also gets some new mix-ups with the steer that are harder to execute than before, but more rewarding in my opinion. I think she is basically as strong or slightly stronger than last patch. The 5k nerf I think is a big deal, mostly from round start, but besides that it's the same. And her far slash feels stronger to me. The main thing is, like Soul, I just think they're characters that are just juiced right now in comparison. So this is a time where I think Mei is not like a top tier. Then there's Happy Chaos. So Happy Chaos I think is kind of borderline. Honestly, I just think this character is broken. It's like fundamentally good character. I will say, at least in my games against him, because I played a decent amount against him in this patch, the biggest thing I feel by far is the HP change. I feel like he dies pretty fast, which I think is a big deal. So then the top group. So these are the characters I think are pretty definitively the best characters in the game. Again, I think HC is like borderline. They'll probably get mad at me, but again, I'm a hater, so too bad. Upload your own video. But let's start with Johnny. So I thought his damage would be down, but the Ensenga damage buff is pretty meaningful when he gets a couple in a combo. Mistfinder is quite powerful right now, the fact that it kills projectiles, and I believe it has a higher projectile clash level than, once again, Tatami. Tatami's kind of, especially air Tatami, is kind of butt at killing projectiles compared to a lot of other moves in the game, and Mistfinder is definitely one of them. Combined with his 3.2 buffs, especially that one I made a video about his dash, I think this character is still definitively top tier. Now, Sin is interesting because I think the opposite of Kai. So I read Sin's changes, and I was like, wow, they nerfed all his normals. Like, that was like the thing that was supposed to be like super good about him, or one of the main things at least that's supposed to be good about him. Isn't he weaker? And then the game comes out and everyone's like, yo, he's crazy right now. So essentially it's just in his output. He can combo off of mostly everything pretty consistently. He can break the wall as long as he has stamina. He usually needs 2. The stamina actually has cooldown, but he has red wild assault. So similarly to Abba, you use meter, the character specific resource, and burst interchangeably to make sure that you can always do something, which is actually pretty interesting. But again, the biggest thing for me is that I thought he was nerfed because of how they wrote his changes, but he was buffed, and actually buffed in a pretty big way. Then there's Leo. So I think Leo's kind of slept on, I think. I've been looking at other people's opinions on the cast, and I think Leo is very, very strong right now. Back turn is extremely strong, and this is one of those things where they nerf something about a character that everyone agrees is really good, and then they give them something really crazy to compensate for it. So Leo had a top class dash block like Abba in normal mode, because Abba had the dash and then you hold block but she keeps moving forward. Leo just has no traction, so he would go really far. So they nerfed his dash block so it's not like Gio's, and this makes Gio's dash block more unique, which I think is good. And of course Johnny, who also has a step dash, can't dash block, so it's like every character with a dash block kind of does something different with it, which is cool. Not even counting Slayer, who like disappears and all that and can go through you. But then they buff back turn so that not only can he use it more in neutral because he has sliding momentum on his back turn normals, and his back turn normals are really strong, but it also makes his mix-up better. And this is something that they've nerfed in the past, because when the game came out, actually his mix-up was insane and they nerfed it. So it's like they buffed the mix-up, they just buffed back turn quite a bit, where people are already like, this thing was really good. But then there's Ram. So Ram is the one that's like really puzzling to me. This character is so juiced. It's like they got rid of all her weaknesses, and so that's why I'm like, wow. Like JH is disjoint and is active until it reaches the ground, like Baikens. Normally, one of the main things you would try to aim for while fighting her is to try to keep a mid-screen position, because she was not super good at converting mid-screen. She was good at converting in the corner. First, they gave her red wall assault to help with this, but then on top of that, they just buffed Daro too, so she has multiple ways of converting where she didn't have it originally. The swords, Guard Crush, are super advantageous. Of course, she can't pick them up, but the amount of time that she has to continue offense is pretty significant. If you don't have a reversal, it's really hard to get out of her offense. And now it's anywhere. Before, the goal was just to avoid the corner. So it's like, okay, in the corner she's strong, mid-screen she's weak. But now it's like she's all around strong. I will say I do like the S sword change, only because I felt like it was just combo fodder before, and now it has more use. And there's some resource management clearly in their mind, because they're like, oh, you can't get it back right away. But again, she has like rock, and then she has the other sword, so you can cycle between the three in a pretty reliable way if you watch competitive Ram players. And finally, there's Gold Lewis. I think Gold Lewis is probably the best character in the game. I think of him pretty similarly to Ram as well. Right now, he's like a big body character that basically has no weakness, where Ram, I can kind of excuse it, because I'm like, okay, you reworked the character entirely, so maybe you want to see how the character works first and how she interacts with the rest of the cast, and then you'll make changes from there, which is fine. Gold Lewis is kind of the same, just better. And he was already top tier for like the past year. So I think the biggest change to Gold Lewis is actually the change to Skyfish. Of course, the Behemoth cancels are really good, but Skyfish is pretty much the best anti-zoning tool in the game right now that he can manually control it. He doesn't dump his entire security meter. I just kind of don't understand why they want him to be so good. I don't know. I don't really get it. You know, I thought already like the most reasonable version of him is probably like 2.5 maybe. But I mean, he was really good in that version too, but it's like they just don't want him to have weaknesses. Like I have said this before, in kind of in jest, but also kind of seriously, that like if like he's just a character made for people who don't play fighting games at all. Like you have the best strike throw, everything you do is plus. Even if they block your stuff, they take damage. He does way too much damage. Everything combos. The resource means nothing, and extra means nothing now. And he has the best anti-zoning tool. And he has a tool that ends neutral. And he's hard to anti-air. Like, I don't know. Anyway, he's the best. He is the best. That's the only thing I'll say definitively. I think Gold Lewis is the best character. Probably loses to nobody, or maybe only loses to Rat. I don't know. I just think he's really broken right now. But yeah, that's kind of my impressions right now. Let me know how you guys feel though. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I do coach Guilty Gear on Metafy if you're interested in on that. That's www.metafy.gg/@LordKnight. I stream, especially when I'm at home, I stream 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, twitch.tv/LordKnight. That's where we, play, lab, talk, and record videos for LK Chronicles, which is my second YouTube channel. So if you want to see segments from the stream, like reactions and talking about Twitter discourse and stuff, I do that all over there. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.